The top tight end in the transfer portal is taking an official visit to Louisville on Tuesday.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. And I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. On Tuesday, Louisville hosts the top tight end in the transfer portal, Purdue's Max Klare. The Cardinals going up against some big-time blue blood programs. Does Louisville have a good chance at landing Klare? Well, that is something that we will discuss coming up here shortly. Louisville also has two other visitors on campus on Tuesday, two defensive players. Rodney Johnson, defensive back from Southern University, and Damarjhe Lewis from Purdue. And then to conclude the show, we'll discuss a wide receiver that entered the portal that I would really like to see Louisville pursue. So a lot of transfer portal talk on the show today. The key news is that Max Klare, Purdue star tight end that entered the portal, is visiting Louisville on Tuesday. And this has been a very interesting recruitment because it seems like the rumors went back and forth. Well, he's not going to visit Louisville, or just kidding, he's going to visit Louisville. And that was actually a misstep. But hey, he's going to be on campus on Tuesday. Well, it's confirmed that he is on campus on Tuesday or today, depending on when you're listening to this show. This is a really key visit for Louisville, obviously. Now, how likely is it that the Cardinals can land the top tight end in the transfer portal? Well, we're going to discuss that here shortly. Let's discuss why Klare is regarded as the top tight end in the portal. 6'4", 240 pounds, native of Indiana, was recruited by Jeff Brohm when he was at Purdue. 51 catches, 685 yards, and 4 touchdowns, averaging 13.4 yards per reception. He had a phenomenal season, despite Purdue not having a phenomenal season. I mean, you look at 7 for 91 against Penn State, 6 for 133 against Illinois. Overall, just a really, really good season for the all Big Ten third team selection. And if he were to come to Louisville, he would obviously be TE1 and be the go-to guy receiving target share in that room. And we know what Jeff Brohm was able to do with tight ends when he was at Purdue. But it has yet to be seen how much the position is going to be featured in the offense moving forward at Louisville. Year one in 2023, you didn't really have the talent in the room. 24, you did. You had Mark Redmond and Damarjhe Johnson. Now, I know Jamari got hurt about halfway through the year, but Redmond wasn't really featured in the offense all that much. So that's something that I would be interested in, is that if they were to potentially land Klare, what would his role be? I mean, you have a really good running duo back with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. You're likely going to have Caullin, Lacy, Chris Bell, and insert receiver's name here. So how important does the tight end position become for Louisville? I think if you have a player like Max Klare, you would be doing your offense a disservice if you didn't, have specific ways to get him the football. And I imagine that Jeff Brohm would definitely do that. Now, he is an absolute game changer. 2 years of eligibility left. Like I said, 6'4", 240 pounds, but he does not move like a 6'4", 240-pound tight end. Really fluid in his movements. I don't want to go as far as saying like Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts-esque, but I mean, we're talking about an instant mismatch at tight end. I think that it would be one of the top portal additions, regardless of position in the past 3 cycles. I mean, you're talking about a player that could contend for one of the most talented tight ends in program history. Not the most talented, but one of the most talented. What makes this pretty interesting as well is that the two main recruiters outside of Brohm when he was being recruited by Purdue. Both of those recruiters are on campus with Louisville. Ryan Wallace and Chris Barclay were his two main recruiters. They are on staff with the Cardinals. And then not to mention Jeff Brohm recruited him to Purdue. So you will obviously try to tap into that previous relationship, but it is not going to be easy whatsoever. Now, multiple schools are involved. He has made multiple visits, but it seems like at this point, according to, industry sources, not my inside information, this is pretty accessible information. It sounds like Louisville, Michigan, Texas, and Texas A&M are the four schools to watch for. It seems like Ohio State is also lurking in the shadows. But if Louisville is going to land Max Klare, they're going to do it by facing some really tough opposition. And you're talking about programs that you're going up against that have very deep NIL pockets. I mean, Michigan just shelled out, $12.5 million total dollars over 4 years for Bryce Underwood. Texas has a lot of money. A&M is the same way. Ohio State had arguably the most expensive roster in college football this season. So if Louisville is going to get Max Klare, they're going to have to pay up for him. And they're also going to have to convince him of the fit. Because, you look at Michigan, and Michigan gets guys to the league at the tight end spot. Obviously, Colston Loveland is going to likely be a first-round pick this year. But Michigan's offense isn't really the best offense to play in if you are a receiver. We've seen that. Yes, their guys could get drafted high, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are featured as much as they should be. But maybe an upgrade at quarterback ends up helping that regard. Texas, that's going to be a tough one to recruit over because, you have the quarterback in place, whether it is Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning, really good offensive line. You see what Gunnar Helm is doing this year. Texas is a nice spot for a tight end to go play. I forget the tight end's name from last year that came from Texas. Jatavian Sanders, I think, was his name. He had a good year, got drafted high. So you've got, the NFL draft pedigree of, hey, look, we sent tight ends to the league, and you're going to be a national championship contender playing in the SEC, and you're going to get paid handsomely to do so. So Texas is going to be a really challenging opponent to go up against in this recruitment. A&M, from a money standpoint, we know how much money the Texas A&M schools have. It is pretty interesting because receivers don't excel much in that offense. It's sort of like Michigan, but even then a step below. Like, who's going to be Texas A&M's quarterback? Will Mike Elko's offense be more attractive to receivers? Because this year it wasn't, especially to the tight end spot. So would that make sense from a football standpoint for Klare to go there? And then if Ohio State is lurking in the shadows, then it's hard to compete against that monetarily. It's hard to compete against that from a playoff caliber standpoint. You're going to dominate the Big Ten outside of Michigan almost every single year, so on and so forth. So I go on that long monologue to suggest that this is one of those recruitments that, like, Louisville is going to have to go toe-to-toe with the Blue Bloods, teams with national championships, teams that make the college football playoff or are contenders on a perennial basis. Like, not only does Louisville have to get right financially in this recruitment, but they're going to have to tap into those relationships, and they're going to have to, like with Miller Moss, you have to prove that, hey, look, this makes sense for you the most on a football standpoint. Now, it was sort of, I won't say easy, but easier to prove that you're going up against Missouri, and that's it. No disrespect to Missouri, but Missouri's not Texas. It's not Ohio State. It's not Michigan. It's going to be a little tough because on the field, it makes sense to go to Texas. So why would Max Klare choose Texas over Louisville? Would Louisville really be able to outbid these schools? Maybe. They could definitely overpay. But that also brings up the fact that you have to replace much more than the other schools do. Like, you still have to fill about 20 spots in the portal. You can't do that with all depth pieces that, are going to command a small NIL deal. You're going to have to bring in some key defensive pieces. So it's just a matter of what are the priorities here for Max Klare? He's going to succeed wherever he goes. So why not get paid the most? This is one that it's great that they're getting him on campus. Don't take this as me saying that it's not significant. But also at the same time, I'm going to do my best to keep you all in the most realistic headspace. And this is going to be a really challenging recruitment to win. I would view it as unlikely at the moment. Things could change. Jeff Brohm has obviously won some recruitments, but at this point on visit day, it's great that he's visited. And I imagine, according to some sources, he's looking to make a decision sooner rather than later. I mean, Louisville does have everything in place for a successful season. It's just a matter of, okay, what are the priorities here? Does he want to stay closer to home? Does he want to go with this to a staff that he trusts? Is it a financial decision? I mean, is it going to where you're possibly going to win the most? Who knows? I guess the only thing we'll be able to see is, well, when he makes that decision of where he's going, I guess we'll understand the priority list. So Max Klare, it's great to have him on campus, but we'll see just how legit of a chance the Cardinals have. Also on campus on Tuesday are two defensive players. We'll break down what both players could bring to the Cardinals defensive unit when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back with the newly expanded 12-team format. It's guaranteed to be larger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs, Southern Methodist University, battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. For all the everydayers out there, I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Coming up later on in the show, we'll have later on in the week, I should clarify, we'll have two more shows. The next show will basically be some more portal talk. We will preview the Florida State men's basketball matchup on the final show of the week, which will air on Thursday. So just keep a heads up on that. Tuesday, Max Klare obviously visiting. There are two other visitors on campus, both on the defensive side of the ball. Southern University cornerback Rodney Johnson and Purdue defensive lineman Damarjhe Lewis. We begin with the first player, that is Rodney Johnson, 6'2" or 6'3" cornerback from New Orleans, Louisiana, played for the Southern Jaguars for the past 3 seasons after transferring from Stephen F. Austin. Was a track star at Stephen F. Austin. Obviously has opted to go to a place to play more football, which he did when he made the transfer over to Southern. 6'3", 200 pounds, a ton of size, a ton of speed. Didn't play much as a freshman for Stephen F. Austin. And then when he went to Southern, that's where his career was able to take off a little bit. Overall, just under 100 total tackles, under 15 pass breakups in 3 seasons with the Jaguars. Also competed for the track and field team. I imagine there's a chance that he could be on the track and field team here at Louisville. So something to look for there. I'm pretty interested to see how this is going to go in terms of Louisville recruiting the defensive back spot, recruiting the secondary, because they just need players at this point. The defense was just decimated by guys not having any more eligibility, guys entering the transfer portal. You're losing pretty much your entire 2 deep at the cornerback spot. So I've had people ask about these 2 players, about whether or not they are starting caliber players. And I responded with, well, they're going to have a chance if they were to come to Louisville. They're going to have a chance to be able to compete for the 2 deep, because right now, more so regarding the secondary, you don't really have anyone Like, you just need bodies. At some point, you have to fill some depth spots. You do need some difference makers overall throughout the defense, but I'm okay with a handful of these spots. Jeff Brohm looking at a certain recruitment and saying, you know what, the production might not match up. He might not have, produced at a Power 4 level, but I believe in the skill set. I believe in the measurables, and I think that this guy can ultimately help our university. So if that's the case with Rodney Johnson Jr., then I'm okay with that. Is he a starting caliber guy? Maybe. I mean, you really won't know until he gets on campus, but 6'3", really quick, really fast. If you can translate those skills over to the Power 4 level and he's able to have an impact, then why not put him in the 2 deep? But I mean, when you watch him play, I mean, it's pretty clear, the athleticism is there. 6'3", 200 pounds, defensive back that is also a track and field star. Like that, I mean, that's what you would obviously like with the defensive back, but ultimately you just don't know. Will he be able to produce at the powerful level? And this just isn't regarding Rodney Johnson. It's regarding all of the non-Power 4 guys that you bring to the program. You just don't know. Every recruitment poses a risk. Every single one of them. You just never know until they get on campus. But I do like the idea of adding Johnson, especially when you need help at cornerback. Like, at this point, I'm not going to be too picky when it comes to who you're going to bring in, who you're not going to, because right now you just need guys. You need some players. You don't have a cornerback committed. You just need some players. So Rodney Johnson is a player that I mean, I could see Jeff Brohm looking at this recruitment and saying, you know what, the skills are there. Let's go ahead and take a chance. And if he commits, then you have one cornerback, one more than you did. So this is one to focus on. Another one that we're going to focus on today is the other visitor, Damarjhe Lewis. And I think that's how it's pronounced. I went all over the internet and tried to find a pronunciation. As a PA announcer, mispronouncing names is a pet peeve of mine, especially if you can help it. But that's just me, being behind a microphone a ton. It's spelled Damarjhe, so I think it's Damarjhe. If it's not, obviously, please forgive me. But Damarjhe Lewis transferred from Purdue, spent the past 4 years at Purdue after spending his first year at Indiana. The 6'3", 300-pound native of Griffin, Georgia, was a pretty solid high school recruit. Joining Indiana, ended up transferring to Purdue. 2020, played in all 12 games, didn't have a huge impact outside of 8 tackles, 1 for a loss, and had a pass breakup. After that, things get tricky. He missed all of 2022 with an injury. He missed a good portion of 2023 with an injury, re-injuring an ankle, which it looks like that's what the issue was. And 2024, which was his best year in college, he missed the first part of the year. He had 14 total tackles, 7 of those solos, 7 assisted, no forced fumbles, sacks, interceptions, or passes deflected. I look at this as Jeff Brohm has shown that he will opt for the belief that a player can produce in his system over production sometimes. Like, we were wondering, okay, Rene Conga from Rutgers last year didn't really have a ton of production to his collegiate career, but the staff believed in the skill set being able to translate, and it did, and he played really well. But there's 2 things to focus on here that you have to maybe, proceed with caution. Number one, just because the Conga situation succeeded and Rene has been really good, doesn't mean that that's going to be the case for everyone. And number 2, the best ability is always and forever will be availability. Lewis, regardless if these are fluke ankle injuries or not, they are injuries. And the same situation with Tyler Shuck is, if you bring Lewis in, will he be able to stay on the field? Very, very valid point, considering that in the past, in the past 3 seasons, he has not played over half of the year. So, or hold on, let me look at 2024. No, only played 5 games in 2024. 2023 doesn't even have stats logged. 2022 doesn't either. And 2021, he played, what is that, 6 games. Now, some places say he has 1 year of eligibility. He says himself that he has 2. So you would imagine that if he were to apply for that medical red shirt, he probably gets it. And then 2020, he came in Indiana. So I would imagine 2 years. It sounds about right. So it'll be interesting. Like I said, we'll just have to wait and see. And I know that people get tired of hearing that, but it's the truth with the portal visits. Some commit pretty soon after the visit, and some play the waiting game. Rodney Johnson and Damarjhe Lewis, I think, would be two candidates to compete for the 2 deep and be meaningful depth. I'm not sure if these are 2 starting caliber players. Potentially they might be. I think defensive line right now, you have some pretty solid players. But secondary, I think that Rodney Johnson could compete for a starting spot. So there is a player that just entered the portal on Tuesday, wide receiver in conference with Louisville, that I would love to see the Cardinals pursue. And I'll tell you who that is when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, there's no better time to go on to FanDuel to utilize all of your betting needs. America's #1 sportsbook has the best odds and the most convenient platform to bet all the college football playoffs, the rest of the NFL regular season, college basketball getting into the full swing of things, NBA, you name it. Like I said, all in America's #1 sportsbook. If you are new, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet on FanDuel.com. It's my go-to place to place all of the live bets that I've got into this year on the most convenient and easily accessible and understandable platform. Once again, you can bet $5 and get $150 back if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. While I have you here, I also want to take the time to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. You can make your holidays brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action. Like I said, join now because this holiday season, PrizePicks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks runs the game. One receiver that entered the portal on Tuesday that is likely to have a lengthy list of suitors, played in conference with Louisville, had a ton of success against Louisville the past 2 years, that I would love to see Louisville go after, is Virginia star receiver Malachi Fields. Now, let me preface the argument by saying that I don't know how serious Louisville, if at all, would be interested and how likely the Cardinals would have a good chance. I don't know. It's way too early to tell right now at early evening point on Tuesday when he literally just entered the portal less than 10 hours ago. But if there is a receiver that I would love to see Louisville go after, it is Malachi Fields. 6'4", 220 pounds from Charlottesville, Virginia. Has had a really, really good career. First 2 years wasn't the greatest with the Cavaliers, but 2023, 811 yards and 5 touchdowns. 2024, 808 yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, the quarterback has been an issue at times. Quarterback play has been, an issue for Virginia in his career. Last year, he had to contend with targets from Malik Washington, who was a high NFL draft pick on, I think, day 2, if I'm not mistaken. And then 2024 as the wide receiver 1, again, quarterback continued to be an issue, but he had a really good season. And this is a situation where he torched Louisville twice. In 2023, he had 4 catches for 85 yards, which, I mean, it's not elite, but it's a good outing. This October, he had 9 for 129 against the Cardinals at Virginia. So if there's any coaching staff that understands just how good this dude is, it's got to be Jeff Brohm and company, because they have seen it firsthand how he's been able to torch Brohm's defenses. Now, at 6'4", 220 pounds, I think that he brings an element to this team that they might not have right now with Chris Bell and Caullin Lacy. That is that jump ball, large receiver, being able to high point the football and nobody can contend with it type guy. Also, I think that Fields gives you a down the field option, a deep threat, because as good as Caullin Lacy is, I think he operates more on yards after catch opportunities. And Chris Bell has shown that he can be a deep threat guy, but I think adding another one opposite of Bell would be huge. Now, there are two sides to this discussion. Would he want to come to Louisville and contend with Lacy and Bell for targets in an offense that already is prioritizing the run? Or, would Chris Bell and Caullin Lacy be okay with Louisville going out and getting, a guy that could contend for the wide receiver 1 status? I think that the situation is that it's up to Jeff Brohm to be able to sell it to both parties. That's what Jeff Brohm is being paid for to do. And that's what he's been able to do in the transfer portal, is just being able to stack up the depth at positions. And right now, Louisville just needs some receivers in. They lost, some guys to the NFL draft, like Ja'Cory Brooks. They lost some guys to the transfer portal, a good amount of players to the transfer portal. So I just feel like this makes a ton of sense. Like literally on every front. He knows the conference, so that he can play well in conference because he's been in the ACC his whole 4-year college career. He would have a good quarterback. He would have a good offensive line. He would have other weapons to be able to take the sole focus off of him, have a good running attack to take the pressure off of him. And then for Louisville, if you're looking for a good wide receiver opposite of Chris Bell and to play alongside Caullin Lacy, then why not go get a guy that's already been tested in the conference? Now, I will say that it is going to be a challenging recruitment because I could see all the top programs lining up for this player, which is the case. And that means that it's going to cost a good amount. Now, I mean, it doesn't help that LSU is likely going to potentially land 2 of the top receivers with Nick Anderson and Barian Brown. But, you have some teams that could be lurking. I mean, Miami is losing some players, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama. Like, it would not surprise me if you see all the Blue Bloods knocking at the door wanting a chance to recruit Malachi Fields. So, again, this was just a segment to say that, like, of all the guys that are in the portal, I would really love to see Louisville go after this guy in particular. So we're going to keep our ear to the ground. A lot of what we talk about on tomorrow's episode of the show will be reactionary to who's going to be on campus for the rest of the week. If anyone commits, hopefully we do get a commitment, but we'll discuss when we come back on the next episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast.